JonBenét Ramsey was murdered 28 years ago. I just had the chance to join John Ramsey, the father of JonBenét, on Court TV at CrimeCon last week in Nashville, Tennessee. Let's catch up on those comments. Well, hi everybody. Thanks for tuning in to Profiling Evil, and please take a moment and hit that like and subscribe button down below. Make sure that you're sharing Profiling Evil with your friends and all of your contacts. And thanks so much for supporting our channel. You know, 2024 has seen significant developments in the murder investigation of the death of little JonBenét Ramsey. This thing occurred 28 years ago. Now, reports suggest that there's now a new dedicated cold case team assigned to re-examine the evidence with a focus on previously overlooked details, things that might point to a potential predator and the involvement of an intruder. You know, during January, we also saw the reemergence and focus when Gary Oliva was discharged from prison, intensifying what some private investigators are claiming is a focus that should be on him as JonBenét's killer. There's new DNA testing on evidence that was collected from the crime scene 28 years ago. And that testing employs advanced techniques that weren't available during the initial stages of the investigation back in the late 1990s. The results of the test, they haven't been made publicly available yet, but according to several news agencies, those tests are underway or completed. Now, John Ramsey, JonBenét's father, has remained vocal in his quest for justice for his daughter's murder. You'll remember his wife, Patsy, died, but they've been urging authorities to utilize modern forensics and genealogy databases to try to trace potential suspects. I had the chance to join my colleague, Joseph Scott Morgan, a forensics expert, on Court TV to talk about the case. The interview was being led by Vinnie Politan and Julie Grant, and this was all occurring while we were at CrimeCon in Nashville, Tennessee, in front of a live audience, which was really a blast. So let's start with the suspect, Gary Oliva's friend, Michael Vell, who shared how he first came to believe that Oliva was responsible for JonBenét's death. Now let's watch this little video clip.
I went to a very small high school, and everybody knew everybody there. And Gary was what we called an orbiter. He just would orbit around our groups and stuff. So we were classmates. We knew everybody at school. It was December 26th, and it was about midnight. And I get that phone call, and it's Gary's voice, and he's like, oh, I just heard, little girl, like it was the most terrifying. I'm getting goosebumps just now telling you guys this because it was terrifying. The next morning, I get to the LA Times on the newspaper on my front porch. It's 6, 7 in the morning. I flip the newspaper open, and there it is on the back side. It says, girl 6 slain in Boulder, Colorado. And I knew something serious had happened that night. I go, wow, he actually killed the girl.
Well, again, we were at CrimeCon and we shared our thoughts in front of a large audience of Court TV fans. And I wanted to share that my thoughts on how valuable the true crime community is. And that just kind of was highlighted by having everyone there. It was just so fun to have everyone there and to be able to meet all of you. It was really helpful. And you know what? The true crime community can be helpful if law enforcement will give them assignments with an authoritative ask. Let's watch this segment where we talk about this.
Absolutely jaw-dropping. That was Michael Vell talking about a call he got from a classmate, Gary Oliva, someone who was on some people's radar, but seemingly making a confession like before it's in the paper. And there was like very little follow-up to this, I believe. There's a confession letter in a note that he wrote. And of course, we're talking about the unsolved murder of JonBenét Ramsey. Still with us, JonBenét's father, John Ramsey, and joining us are investigators who all throughout the year help us out so much at Court TV. Joseph Scott Morgan, distinguished scholar of applied forensics, professor of forensics at Jacksonville State University, and host of the extremely popular Body Bags podcast.
Right.
And we've got Mike King, religious cult expert, retired police commander, host of the very popular Profiling Evil podcast, and author of the book Deceived. Great to have you both here. We're talking about JonBenét Ramsey. John is here with us. That confession, I don't understand how that doesn't become more of a focal point. I know there are false confessions in high-profile cases. John Mark Carr, I get it. But your thoughts about that, Joseph?
Well, exactly. One of the things that you have, particularly with a high-profile case, is that everybody wants attention, don't they? And you don't know what path any of these little markers along the way are going to take you down. And so the police have to be very, very careful in what they're saying. And my suspicion is, from a forensic standpoint, is that there is a lot of application of forensic science here that we don't know a lot about at this point in time as far as testing goes, what samples they have, what they're going to be testing against.
Is there any reason to not give everything to the FBI?
I don't think that there is. Why not go all in? And that's always been my contention. Is look, this has always been this festering thing that I've never been able to get past with JonBenét's case. Why not? Why not give people relief? I don't say closure because I don't think anybody actually ever gets closure, but relief from the pain of it all. And if it's that simple, engage with them, put their full force behind this thing, and let's bring it to a resolution. Either way, at least we'll know which way the wind's blowing.
If we try that and fail, then at least we've tried.
Yes, yep, and that's the way I feel about it as well.
Mike, what are your thoughts?
I think even just sitting here with John, it brings out this responsibility that I think government has to evolve. That this is no longer a time and place where you can just keep everything quiet, especially after 25 years, that you don't start to open the kimono a little and share a little information. We have seen this true crime community that we're taking part with tonight explode with information, intelligence, evidence, ideas, but we still have kind of these archaic belief systems that we got to keep it all in-house and we got to keep anyone else from seeing the secret files. And I get that you need to keep some things close to the vest so that you can use those at the proper time to impeach a potential suspect or to use at a pertinent time. But my gosh, I think it's time to start really taking advantage of all that's available and really collaborate instead of keeping all these closed communities of investigators or family or anyone else. Vinny?
That's right. I heard some applauding from the audience, Commander. That's right. Preach.
Again, folks, it's been 28 years since the murder of JonBenét Ramsey, and thankfully, the evidence that was recovered remains in place. Now, there are a lot of complaints about how the evidence was recovered, how the crime scene was preserved, but I'm going to pass that and just talk about a couple of things. Number one, the open basement window and the suitcase positioned beneath the window and how it might possibly support the idea that intruders might have been involved. Not to mention that there was still that DNA that was recovered, this theory that the stun gun was used, and all of this coming together with the idea of a stranger assault. Remember, the family members in JonBenét's case were all suspect at one point or another. But what are the chances that a family member would have used a stun gun if that evidence is accurate, rather than just reacting like we might think in a disorganized manner when something happened and they were angry for a moment, or did something and they were trying to stage the scene. Now, there are still a couple of theories in the case that are really worth kind of reviewing for a moment. First, and I think it dives right into Oliva, is this theory of a stranger intruder. This theory suggests that an unknown intruder broke into the Ramsey home and committed the crime. Now, it is supported by a few interesting pieces of evidence, namely that broken window in the basement and that nearby suitcase that was put as a means to get out of the window and leave the house, supporting the idea that entry into or exit from the home was made through that window. Then there's the unknown DNA that was recovered from JonBenét's clothing and under her fingernails. Now, if I'm remembering it correctly, it didn't match any family members, and I think that was accurately reported by the Daily Beast and a few others. Now, there was the paint brush handle and the garrote and so many other pieces of evidence. But in regard to Oliva, forensic experts have suggested that marks on JonBenét's body might have been caused by a stun gun. Now, behaviorally, again, this suggests something that was more planned, in my opinion. Now, the ransom note also is interesting. It could support a theory of a stranger crime, although some have suggested that it was an elaborate way for the family to mislead police. But if it were a stranger, there's no real way for them to collect, and collecting would increase the exposure of capture. Now, the note was found in the Ramsey home, and it raised suspicion because it was unusually lengthy, and it was written on paper that came from inside the Ramsey home. So, if it was the predator, it had to have been an afterthought, maybe something to stage the scene in their particular situation. Now, you can dig into this rabbit hole, and you might find yourself exploring the sexual predator theory or the links to the beauty pageant scene. You may find yourself in a rabbit hole that you haven't been in for a long time, but this case is certainly one that's worthy of going down the rabbit hole on. The real thing here is, though, it appears that the crime scene did have some staging. Now, Julie Grand of Court TV asked Joe Scott and me about the evidence and the things that are still haunting us. Now, I'm going to play that thing as it kind of unfolded for you all to watch.
I would love to ask you both, from looking at it from an investigator's point of view, as you both are, what is the thing, if you had to touch on one thing today that troubles you the most about that case when we think about the evidence? What keeps you up when you think about that case?
I'll go first. I have to start at the beginning.
Yeah.
I think, for me, being someone that teaches crime scene techniques and processing and all that sort of thing, and this ground has been covered extensively. It's the idea that we should be handling every scene, every time the same way, that you hold every case to the same standard. And one of the things that's really interesting here is that with Boulder, maybe they never thought that a case like this would happen. Mm-hmm. And people get caught with their pants down all the time. The fact is, it can visit anybody. It doesn't have to be a big city, a big community. Yeah. So you do the same thing every single time from the perspective of there are certain procedures that you go through. Security of a scene, for instance, clearing a house, going through the house. As a police officer, to make sure that you've covered everything. And remember, this did not start off as a homicide investigation. This started out as a child was missing. And even in those circumstances, where have you looked? Where haven't you looked? That sort of thing. So it all starts at that moment in time where you look back in time, you say, only if we had done this. That's for me.
And I love being on with Joe Scott because I really find I learn every time I listen to him. But the thing that really gets me is that we have a problem in the industry where we oftentimes won't ask for help from the right people, perhaps even at the right or the wrong time. And in cases like this, it's always good to get a new set of eyes looking on it. I mean, I think back to a college paper that I wrote where I was convinced I had created the masterpiece of the century, only to have more red lines on that thing when a professor looked at it. So why not get other disciplines, something that might be completely outside of the criminal justice world even, to consider some of these things? But then we got to go back and look at these pools of possibilities and really start to analyze what makes them really rise to the surface versus somebody else. Because when we're dealing with predators like this that we're seeing come out even recently, we have to consider sometimes it's all about fantasy and they're just dreaming up things. Other times they might be serious contenders for what's wrong here. So Vinny then turned to John Ramsey for his thoughts, and I want to close with those. But before I do, I want to just remind you of this relatively new re-emerging suspect, Gary Oliva, why he continues to be a person of interest in the case, and why we need to continue to kind of look into him until he's excluded. Oliva is a convicted sex offender with a history of crimes against children. Now, he was living near the Ramsey home, and he reportedly issued a confession letter in 2019 to his buddy, we talked about him a moment ago, where he confessed to the accidental killing of JonBenét. Now, when police arrested Oliva on an unrelated charge, or actually charges, they recovered a magazine cutout of JonBenét in his backpack, along with a stun gun. Now, that's really interesting, the stun gun. This seems pretty interesting to keep in mind because you got to remember that the DNA hasn't matched up to Oliva, that DNA that was found on JonBenét's body. So Oliva, he remains a person of interest, but there isn't any direct evidence linking him to the crime. And the confessions, or these admissions, may appear to be nothing more than fantasies as he focused on that little child and delved into his own psyche and his own preferential type of victim, children. But you got to keep in mind that Oliva has a criminal history that's consistent with this kind of a crime, and he did live near the Ramseys. Now, John Ramsey took this final comment that I thought was pretty interesting.
And John, we only have about a minute left here, a little less than a minute. From your perspective, is there anything that gives you hope in getting an answer?
Well, there's been some personnel changes in the Boulder Police Department. They brought in a new chief maybe 3 years ago from the outside, which was good. We met with her. We're impressed. Slow process, but about the time we thought, hey, we're making some progress here, she took another job. So there's the assistant, her deputy chief of police is now the interim chief of police. Good guy, we met with him, but he's interim. He's hoping he can get the full-time job, but we don't know. So it's kind of in a parked mode right now. I don't see that there's going to be much progress. But what you said, both of you, is exactly on target as far as I'm concerned. We've never criticized the Boulder Police for not having experience. They didn't have a homicide department. They didn't need one. Bless that.
Yeah.
But they refused help that was offered in the very beginning. Denver police offered 2 experienced homicide detectives full-time to come to Boulder. They refused that help. That was within days. And that's been going on almost for 28 years. So it's been very frustrating. But you're exactly right. That's
on target.
Open it up. I looked at this Idaho case, and that sheriff, or that chief of police, did exactly the right thing.
Right from the beginning. From the beginning, which was
anybody
great.
he get his hands on, he brought him in.
Yeah.
And within 3 weeks, they had
We're out of time for tonight. John Ramsey, thank you so
Yes,
much
sir.
for joining us. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you,
Joseph Scott Morgan, Mike King, great job. We appreciate it.
Well, I'd like your thoughts on this 28-year-old murder mystery. Do you think Oliva has anything to do with this case? And what advice would you have for the murder investigation and that cold case squad that's looking into it? I hope that you'll put your comments down below and you'll weigh in on the remarks that other people make in the chat box. I'm going to be reading them and I'm going to be responding, and I hope that you might too. And please make sure you're hitting that like and subscribe button. And remember that you can find Profiling Evil on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. And remember that you can listen to Profiling Evil podcasts on your favorite podcast platform. And you can always check out our website at profilingevil.com. And while you're at all this, make sure that you're checking out my newest collaboration with A&E's History's Greatest Mysteries, and the video that we just released 3 days ago on who really killed King Tut. Hey, thanks for your support of Profiling Evil, folks. We'll see you soon at the next crime scene.